Hi, and welcome to another edition of Newsmakers Journal of the Vaccine Year. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, April 30th, and I am very pleased to welcome back Hilda Maldonado, the superintendent of the Santa Barbara Unified School District. Thank you so much for joining us. I know this is a crazy time. It's been a crazy time since you arrived. Thanks very much for taking the time, Hilda.
Thank you, Jerry, and I'm really honored to be here with you today.
Well, let me begin by congratulating you because you just, I'm told, got your EDD, your basically your PhD in education, which has been a long project that you worked on. Congratulations. And can you share what your dissertation is on? Because I think that's kind of interesting.
Thank you. Yes, it's a 3-year program at Loyola Marymount University. It's a social studies leadership program. And I did my dissertation on testimonials of Latino leaders nationally that are leading large urban school systems with significant numbers of Latino students that are enrolled in those systems, and also significant number of students who are learning English, or what we call here emergent multilingual. And I studied what are their practices in leadership.
So that's a good deal because you kind of double dipped on that. You got your degree and you're also able to rip off everybody's best practices and bring them here to Santa Barbara.
That's exactly right. I don't believe in reinventing the wheel when it's already been invented. And the promise of a doctorate degree is that you do specialize in areas that you're working in. So that's a tip for anybody who wants to get one. Do it in an area that you're already working on.
All right, fair enough. All right, so when we spoke almost a year ago, it was just a couple of weeks before you actually started work. You'd just been hired, and I asked you about how you felt coming here in the middle of a pandemic and handling that, and you said it's a perfect storm for us to be innovative and think about education as a way to prepare our country to continue to lead the world. I do see it as an opportunity. So I sort of felt the first blush of optimism there before you actually, then you show up and July 1st and, maybe we're going back to school and yes, we are. No, we're not. Yes, it's hybrid, red tier, yellow tier. I mean, it's been quite a year. What's your reflection on how it's gone? You finally have most of the students back in classes. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess the reflection is I did sound very optimistic, didn't I? I still am. It's the first year that I taught, I was given the Pollyanna Award by the other teachers at the end of the school year, and I think I still probably live up to that name. It has been a difficult road, I won't lie. There's been a lot of pressure on all of us as leaders, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. With the decisions that we make and why we make them, and trying to explain as we at the same time make sense of the ever-changing, colors by the state. What is yellow? Is it blue or green? Which one was good? Which one was bad? What does that look like? I'm very proud of the decisions we made. I don't think I have any regrets. I think it was right in November to allow ourselves the extra time we needed to identify the facilities and staffing preparation that were needed, because we were all new to this, including, having the top leader be new is an impact to a system like ours that's large in that sense. I'm still very optimistic. I'm very proud of the work that we have done. I'm very proud of all our employees, our parents. I thank our parents for continuing to trust and have patience with us. And of course, today I can say that because we're coming down off this huge infection rate and we're getting to yellow tier, which we've talked about for months. So I'm very happy that we've gotten here, but it has had its painful moments.
Yeah. Just as a general matter, do you think, looking back on it, that, and there's a lot of conversation nationally about Florida and other places that kept schools open or had schools open earlier. Do you think we were too cautious with the way that we approached schools and getting students back?
Back in November, I don't. Well, obviously knowledge is power, and having more knowledge about the way that we're staffed in Santa Barbara Unified, we were looking at staffing in elementary and opening elementary first, which I found out needed some of the more staffing because the younger kids obviously, require that. Were we too cautious? One of the things about being a principal and a superintendent is there's the worry that you have every night is the amount of responsibility you have for the lives of each and every one of those kids. So no, I don't think we were too cautious. I think we were optimistically cautious, or just, and that's not even a word, is it, or a concept. We were at the right tension of cautiousness, I believe. We had to walk a paradox of optimism and realism.
Yeah.
When I sit back and look at the optimism to open, but the realism of what it meant then, knowing that we were coming up on a holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, hearing about the rates starting to come up, not yet having a vaccine. If we think about now how we are all vaccinated and we weren't then, we didn't even know if it was approved yet. And in the midst of that, having changes to the guidance from the health and safety protocols, which we're sitting here trying to read as fast as we can, make meaning of, and then teach, cascading down to the school system into a classroom teacher that we cannot access except through Zoom, had its challenges. And so I feel very confident about the way we did it.
All right. So we have, I think, 176 cases altogether, about 2/3 students, only 10 that happen on campus, but 29 cases in April. Some news organizations made a big deal of this. How do you feel about where we are now in terms of the cases? Is that an alarming number, the 29, or what's your assessment?
Well, look, honestly, one is too many. We shouldn't have one at all. So every case matters. Every case is important because it impacts not just that person having an infection rate, but also the in close contacts, right? So if it's one person, who was next to them within 3 feet, within 6 feet, for how much time, those families then, it's a ripple effect. I think there are, when I think about close to 13,000 students, close to 2,100 staff members, to have 29 cases seems, not as alarming as we might think it would be for a large organization, knowing again, that circles of contact that spread out through our community.
And where are we on vaccinations? What, have most of the teachers, most of the staff been vaccinated? And also, as I understand it now, 16-year-olds are going to be able to begin to be vaccinated. Is that correct?
That's right. So 82% of our staff are vaccinated or partially vaccinated. We continue to push out information to them about getting their second vaccine. Many of us, including myself, were vaccinated with the Johnson & Johnson. So we've been done for a while. We are going to offer the opportunity for parents who cannot take their own kids and who allow their kids, because remember, this is still under emergency approvals by the federal government to have students vaccinated. And some parents have written to us and said to us they do not want their child vaccinated. We are offering buses that will take kids to Cottage Hospital in a partnership with Cottage Hospital to do that for parents who choose to do so. We also heard on Tuesday from Susan Klein Rothschild that there will be soon 12 and over vaccinations available, maybe even as soon as this summer. So those are all things that are happening, but I'm very cognizant of the fact that some parents will not choose to do that.
All right. And then when you say 82% of staff, that's teachers and staff, has there been a substantial amount of vaccine hesitancy that people or just teachers don't want to get it? And have you given any thought to requiring them to get it?
So we know that we did survey our staff when we were first helping to make appointments for everyone. We started, again, like everything, right? It evolved. We first started with prioritizing groups of employees to get vaccines first, our most vulnerable that are closest to everyone. And when we did that first survey, we found out that 11% of our staff said we're not going to take the vaccine. So I already have that data, and I know that they're not ready to take it. As an employer, I don't know that we are able yet to require a vaccine. Again, especially if it's still under emergency approvals. I think I can certainly appreciate and respect the fact that some people won't want to do that yet.
Yeah, okay. Because I've heard of cases, for example, where teachers who may not have the vaccine or haven't wanted to come back to the classroom, students are in the classroom, but they're learning via Zoom by the teachers who's at home. I mean, it's sort of a weird setup, no?
That was not contingent on them returning to the classroom or staying out of the classroom. That's actually not been any of our criteria at all. The people that are teaching from their classroom have leave approvals based on underlying medical
I
conditions.
see.
So that's prior to, they're not related. They're not related at all. We do have some teachers, just like with families and students that can't be in person.
All right. And could you just describe just a little bit what the actual physical spaces look like, what you've had to do within the classrooms, within the schools? And also, has every school now been able to accommodate all of the students who wanted to go back?
Yes, so we did start with our 6-foot rule, and we set up classrooms based on 6 feet of spacing. In some schools, we had to remove bookcases, extra tables, teaching stations that looked a certain way, and store all of those. So our maintenance and facilities team have been incredible in doing that work. In some cases, the teachers were there to sort of guide us how they wanted their room set up, but it was all driven by 6-foot rule. Then we found out, I think 2 weeks into our reopening, that we could do 3 feet. So then we adjusted and then went to the 3-foot rule and were able to bring in a few more seats. We have been able to accommodate the parents who initially requested the in-person instruction, which in our case was close to 75% of our students are back in person. We have had some movement of families saying, nope, don't like it, too close for me, I'm going back to distance learning. And similarly, we've had some families going like, that doesn't look too bad, let us back in. And so as space is allowed, we are able to make those changes, but they're on a case-by-case basis. I have been going to schools, visiting schools. I was just at Dos Pueblos yesterday. There are some classrooms that I've looked at, I'm like, ooh, that is pretty close. No one else can come in here. This is close enough for me. And, you know, we've looked at, there are built-in bookcases in some schools. I mean, there's just so many configurations you can imagine from our time in schools. There's heating. Do you remember the old radiator heater type? You know, furniture like that kind of impedes. There's been times when, for example, the teacher is right up by the blackboard and we've had to move where they stand and have their technical equipment off to the side so that kids are almost sitting up to that wall to fit them. So just a variety of configurations, but all in all, I think the students are able to maintain the distance, maintain their masks.
That's Henry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I think they're
all wearing masks. The teachers are wearing masks, correct?
Yes, everybody's wearing their masks.
And are there like plastic sneeze guards or whatever around people, or you didn't have to do that?
We never went that route, and there's been research that says it's not that effective. Remember the way that the virus travels, even if you sneeze here, depending on how the air flows. It's all about airflow. And I don't know if you got to hear, we had this whole thing has been about partnerships. I mean, this has not been done just on our own. We had a pair of parents from UCSB that helped us conduct ventilation checks in our classrooms. And they basically came out with their measuring air movement tools and went through classrooms with our maintenance staff and taught them how to measure the air changes with everything closed, windows, doors closed, everything open. What does the airflow look like? We basically did it almost like our own research study, annotated all of these checks through all our classrooms in all our schools, fed that information to them. They ran it through their formula and were able to tell us how many air changes were happening through the classrooms. So we've directed all teachers to have windows open, doors open, and fans that blow the air out of the classrooms. And that's what you'll see.
And we got what, 19 schools in the district, I think, and probably, I don't know, what, 50, 100 classrooms per school. That's a lot of classrooms. I mean, it's well over 1,000, I would imagine. And you've had to do that individually. It's
Yeah, yes, we have. And, you know, we did sampling, right, of every school when we did this study. And then we told, I walked every classroom with Karen McBride from SBTA, and we said, you know, to the teachers, meet us there, tell us what you need, tell us what you're concerned about. And we had a process for them to tell us. So if they felt uncomfortable, we would send the team in, check the ventilation in that classroom, check the number of air changes, and report back that to them.
yeah, perfect storm, huh? Okay.
Well, you know, here's the thing. I'm a teacher at heart, and all our maintenance folks were trained on how to do this. So we learned, and we had an opportunity to learn, to build capacity of our staff on how to do this. I mean, yes, I'm an optimist.
All right. Okay. All right. So looking ahead, so are you, or how confident are you, or are you just assuming that everybody is going to go back to the classroom in the fall, or at least have the opportunity to do that? And you know, to what extent will you continue distance learning?
We are currently conducting a survey of our families, how they feel about who would want to even stay in distance learning, to see if we're still at that 75-25 that I mentioned earlier. We feel that we can put together a pretty robust, rigorous distance learning program. I mean, we learned that we could do this. We could deliver instruction. It does take a special kind of student to also be in that space. We found that there were kids that actually thrive under a distance learning program. They suddenly, all these social demands on them and ways of participating were done in such a way that they could show what they know, right? And then there were kids that nope, they needed to be in person. They need that interaction. And so we're going to be looking at that closely. It is our wish to keep that innovation happening, but we want to make sure that there's interest from our parents to do so. In essence, in the high school system, we've already had that in our La Cuesta school, which is a more personalized type of program for kids that really don't have success in our traditional comprehensive high schools. For elementary, we probably will do it only at the higher grade levels, not necessarily, I mean, the little ones, there's just impossible. You can't do that with preschool to even maybe third, fourth grade, you know, I wouldn't recommend it, but fifth grade and up, I think there might be an opportunity for us to do that. And again, having teachers who have serious underlying conditions during this pandemic until we can say we're officially out of it, it provides them an opportunity to continue to teach and gives them an opportunity. And I have to say, I'm so grateful to the elementary teachers that took on multiple grade levels to do this, which is very different than the secondary space. So in elementary, we had to give some teachers multiple grade levels of distance learning children. And again, technology provided that opportunity for them to innovate and do schooling in such a different way, because even as we take attendance, we're no longer taking attendance in the traditional in seat. Are you in your seat for 6 hours? You're here. Where now it's more about, did you turn in your paperwork? Did you complete this assignment? Marked present. And that's such a shift that's happened, probably a much needed shift in my opinion. So yes, I think that we would want to create some space there for us to continue to innovate, but we want to make sure that parents will also want to do it with us.
But just to clarify, the default will be, as your expectation is today, that students will be going back to classroom.
That would be our wish. That would be, yes, until public health tells me that it's fully on, that I have to stay in that space, right? Right now, I'm still under public health directives.
Right.
But yes, we would want to get there, and yeah, we definitely, that is the best place for most kids. But I don't want to lose the fact that for some, it is also an opportunity for distance learning.
Hey, let me back up. You know, all of this maintenance work that you had to do to all the classrooms sounds expensive. Did you have extra budget money to do that? How much did that all cost?
Well, I don't have the exact dollar amount, but we did have CARES money, CARES funding through the federal and state government. So yes, a lot of overtime for our folks. People are doing amazing overtime work.
All right. I want to talk a little bit about what you're planning for summer learning, what people of my age used to call summer school. And as I understand it, there's sort of a menu of options that are going to be available to students. A, is it mandatory? B, is it optional? C, do you have to be invited? How does it work, and what's going to be on offer?
So it's by invitation at this time. We are going to have 6 elementary sites, and then all our secondary sites will also be offering Summer of Learning. And it's meant to really make time for us to engage with children in literacy, math, and language during the morning part of it. In the afternoons, we have partnerships that we're developing with people across our city that will offer enrichment activities for kids, whether it's music, going to the park, field trips, and others. Right now, we're in the process of evaluating the proposals that were sent to us by several of the nonprofits in town. I like to think of the city as an amazing classroom. We have the mountains, we have the beach, we have so many historical places that we can take children to. And just really getting out in the summer fun. I remember having a lot of fun myself as a summer school child in Los Angeles, and getting an opportunity to do sports, crafts. We did leather, we did woodworking, we did so many different things. And we really want to just make learning fun and have kids and families think of it as not about, this loss or you're in trouble and things like that, but more about learning is a fun thing, and we want to make sure that you're with us, and that we continue this in this basically much needed space where we want to make improvements really in literacy and math. Let's be honest.
So how many students are you able to accommodate, and what is the criteria for someone being invited?
Let me look up the number of students. I know we have it in one of our slides. We're looking at about 183 teachers that we'll be needing. And we're doing, I think, something like 15-to-1 ratio. And we have teachers that have already told us they're willing to work the summertime. And what was the other question?
What's the criteria for a student to be invited?
Yes, the criteria are when we look at, again, literacy in math and language. If kids are really, in their comprehension reading tests, if their Lexile levels of reading, which is measuring vocabulary and comprehension, are lower, we're going to invite those students. For the mathematics, similarly, if they're not getting those foundational mathematics skills, we're going to invite those students to be here.
And I want to talk a little bit about this term learning loss. So are you speaking here in terms of the criteria of students who may have had those issues all along, or they developed them during the a distance learning project, or what? Sort that out for me.
It is a little bit of both, Jerry. So I forgot to mention also credit recovery for our high school students. So there's also the kids who are not, getting enough credits to graduate from high school. So it's a little bit of kids who've historically not been succeeding in school. We can tell that, we know that, we have the data to know who has continuously fallen behind. And then there's kids who have suffered through this pandemic, who may not have been able to really succeed in a distance learning program, that are now coming in person, and we're looking at, their reading, their writing skills, and so forth. So it's probably a combination of both, I would say. It would be wrong for me to say it's across the board, everybody had learning loss, because that's not true.
Yeah.
We've had both.
So will each student now be assessed by the end of the year to determine whether or not they fit those criteria, or has that already happened? Or
we're in the middle of conducting spring assessments, our traditional spring assessments. So the federal government gave states an option. In the past, we were all required to test 95% of our students to meet the federal assessment criteria. That has been changed, and they said to us this year that states could apply to be waived from that requirement, or basically there's a blanket waiver from our traditional state assessments. So then the state told districts, you decide which assessments you want to use. You can use ours or you can create your own. So we went with creating our own, which is to use what our current assessments have been for the end of the year traditionally, and that's what we're doing right now. They're called interim assessment benchmark assessments, and there's another one called Renaissance, which measures literacy and math.
So how do you determine if a student has fallen behind during the distance learning experience? And beyond the summer learning, what resources and supports are in place to catch them?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I don't think the teacher can do it all alone.
Right. No, definitely a group event here. There are standards of learning for every grade level, for every subject area. They're called the Common Core State Standards. Mm-hmm. And that's the standard that we're measuring their progress against at each of the levels. So that is how we're going to determine where they're at. As far as what are other things we're doing, Summer of Learning is just one. Currently, for example, we have some elementary teachers doing after-school tutoring with our students. So tutoring is another way that we're going to be looking at investments. We're looking, some of the funding that we're getting to the federal and state programs require us to hire more what I call teaching assistants. Here it's called paraprofessionals for general ed students. Basically, it's an assistant to the teacher that's going to be working with them, with students. So we're going to look at a large investment and do a call to hire more young people to come and work in our classrooms to help our teachers. So tutoring, after school, summer school, interventions. There's also some professional development that we have in the summer for our teachers, where we're going to work with teachers on what are ways that you can do what I call on-demand adjustments to your teaching, so that if you notice a student is really not getting the way you're teaching that lesson, how do you pivot and make changes so that you're on the spot adjusting the teaching and the learning. And so that's another, so Summer of Learning, there's for summer learning for kids, summer learning for teachers and leaders. We have two weeks planned. The first is for teachers and principals to come and learn about, again, literacy, math, language, history. What are ways that we need to really look at who has been historically left behind, and how do you teach them in ways that are ways for 21st century learners and just the type of learner that we have.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead, finish your thought.
It's okay. And then in July, we have a leadership institute, a 1 week long institute just for leaders of this organization to look at leadership techniques. We were all called to be leaders in a different way during this pandemic. So we want to keep some of those lessons and then at the same time be very honed in. So what is our goal? What are we trying to achieve based on the data that we get from the spring about what kids need?
So just to close on this, what is your just overall take on learning loss? I mean, I've read a lot of the commentary about it, that sort of ranges from, this generation is doomed to failure to it's no big deal because kids are resilient. I mean, what is it? And how much of an impact is it going to have going forward?
Well, I'm not in the camp that we're doomed to failure. And I'm not in the camp that, kids don't know anything, for sure. I think it's such a fallacy for us to send that message for kids. I think it's actually, in some ways, could be very hurtful. Many of us, if we're told, like, who would have said, for example, a Latina Mexican immigrant girl that's 11 years old was going to be a superintendent in Santa Barbara and get a doctorate? When I was growing up, nobody would have believed that or said that about people like me. And so for me, that's not ever going to be the camp I'm in. We are teaching 21st century learners. We are in the era of knowledge. We are in an era where kids have knowledge at their fingertips. Our job is to make sure that the knowledge they're looking at, the sites that they're looking at are first source. And I know this as a journalist, first source resources. Am I saying that correctly? Who is your source for this piece of information? Because we have a lot of information. And we want to make sure kids know who is giving you that information, through which perspective, what is the lens. It's no longer, you know, when I was growing up, we had to wait for the Encyclopedia Britannica to arrive,
Right.
letter H, so I can learn about history. That's not the way it is anymore. So when we think about and say things like, we're doomed, kids can't learn to read, some of these kids don't even need a teacher to learn. We have to be
Well,
very clear.
I mean,
Technology is- Go ahead.
beyond the general circumstance, I mean, we have this extraordinary, historic, once in a lifetime, hopefully, pandemic event that completely upset the track that every kid was on. So the specific loss of learning that comes from that, I mean, what do you think? I mean, is it going to be huge? Is it manageable? You know, how much should I worry about my grandchildren here?
I think as I look at some of the initial assessments that are coming in, there is a percent of loss of learning in the traditional methods of you know, schooling. What are in life, in our lifetime, we learn not just in school, but in other things that happen around us. So I think that how we approach what happens next is what matters. When we look at these assessments together as a staff, and we look at what kids need in terms of connections to people in schools, because if there's one thing I have seen is the very clear learning from our staff that relationships with kids are the key to learning and teaching. I've heard it over and over again by our teachers. I can't connect to such and such a child. Somebody help me. And then I see counselors coming in and saying, we'll go to that house, we'll find out what's happening. And then we turn around and say, oh, that family is homeless. We're gonna give them a solar powered hotspot for their device. I saw people problem solving in ways that got to the root of who is this family, who is this child, and what do they need so they can access education and learning. That is immeasurable in the traditional ways. So when I think of the whole organization in that sense, so yes, maybe we got kids in 3rd grade that are reading levels at 2nd grade. We can make up reading levels in a year. I've seen it. I've seen people do that. So I'm not so worried from that perspective. I don't want us to lose the relationship aspect of the work that we need to do and the humanity that happened when we all came together during the pandemic. That's for me why I'm in this business.
So what you're saying is stuff happens in life. People have to deal with it. It's a pandemic, deal with it, right? I mean, and sort of separate and apart from the classroom pedagogical view of this, that it's one thing that happened in their childhood and they're sure they'll remember it forever, but you know, on a one-by-one basis, you'll attempt to deal with the
you know, perhaps it goes back a lot to my own life's journey, that terrible stuff happens in life. You know, it does. And this was one that we also experienced collectively as humans across the world. And so what did we learn from that? We learned that we can change. We learned that we can adapt. We learned that we can be flexible in the way that we do things. We learned that even the way we conceptualize what teaching and learning is had a different aspect beyond just what does the book say, what does the test have, did you get it or not? So I think we learned a lot about ourselves as people. You know, in the United States, we have a very individual before the group sort of a way of looking at things. I think in this pandemic, we looked around and said, hey, we need each other. Maybe we need to think of the good of the group. What's the good for our community? How do we look at that differently and think to ourselves, my actions impact you, your actions impact me. Maybe I need to start caring more about how that's happening and work together in a way that's different. So I think in history, we have learned that in every event that has impacted us, where we've had so much loss of life, there are always where there's always the heroes, right? And there's always the people that are going to run to those issues and take care of the others. So that's where I'm coming from. And I don't know, Jerry, the way you kind of put it, it's a little harsher, but yes, things happen, and yet we continue to live on.
All right. Do you have a sense of how many students, or about, just kind of ballpark, the district has actually lost through this? In
Yeah.
other words, students who never, came online or went to a pod or went to private school. What is that?
217.
217, which
Yeah.
is,
So when we compare enrollment to previous years, it's about 217 that we lost. And last year was 246 prior to the pandemic. So it's about the same amount of number here. And at least that's the number that I've been given.
okay. So not that, so not an extraordinary number based on the conditions that we.
No, but I will say that they were mostly in the elementary, preschool, kindergarten space, which is different. I think a little different than the past. I don't have the number for the other grades, and that makes sense because, again, a preschooler and a kindergartner online is not the ideal situation.
So maybe some people just decided to wait for their kids to go to kindergarten.
For the record, I never went to preschool or kindergarten.
All right. Well,
it just wasn't offered in my country.
Did you disclose that on your doctorate?
Thankfully, it wasn't part of the application.
They didn't make
the
you
doctorate or the job.
Make that up. Hey, I want to back up to you. You mentioned leadership. Now, you obviously inherited a cabinet, and given the circumstances, it wasn't exactly the time to clean house, I suppose. But what is your vision for developing leaders within the district?
I think we have an amazing group of leaders in Santa Barbara Unified, and emerging leaders as well that I've seen. Again, the traditional roles were reversed. We had to rely a lot on our principals and people on the ground to really understand what was happening. And everything that we did with them. So if we were to make a decision, if we had to, pivot a certain way, we always consulted with them first, because they were the ones that were going to really be doing the work. And so in the work that I've done, transformational leaders do the leadership work with people, not to people. And so in a hierarchy, you don't flatten the organization, because at the same time you can't do that. It's just, you need a leader. But being cognizant of who is really leading at the front is what matters. So I would say that I'm proud of the work that we have done in terms of how we all just had to come together and trust each other, because that's what this pandemic also did.
All right, let me ask you a couple of really quick, real specific things. We had this development during the pandemic where grades were changed, or the grading system was changed. Nobody could get an F anymore. I mean, it varied, but where does that stand? Is that going to be restored, or what?
Yeah, so we're going to continue to have that conversation with our teachers. And again, this was an opportunity where we saw that our traditional ways of grading were not exactly measuring the way we think of the Common Core state standards today. So we will be looking at changing that, but we're going to do it again with people, not to people. And our grave mistake and the lesson learned in that event was that we hadn't consulted enough people or prepared them enough for this change.
So
we'll continue doing that, and we're going to continue to look at grading, changing our grading different. We're going to continue to look at changing grading, but once we're all at the table together.
All right. So as for now, it's still where it was back in January, whenever that change was made, correct?
Correct. The decisions that were made in January still stand.
Yeah, okay. In terms of the dual language program at McKinley, which is supposed to begin in the fall, is that still on? And how have you dealt with the parents whose kids were about to enter kindergarten there who were not happy about that?
That's still going on. And I've heard maybe from one or two that are not happy with that. For the most part, I've heard the opposite. Lots of excitement, lots of parents who are willing to sign up. I was there on a Saturday recently where I heard from several families that are monolingual who are really looking forward to having their children be bilingual and see the benefit, not just in language, but in culture, in access to different ways of processing information. So I think all in all, you know, I'm excited that this opportunity, the decision was made before me, but I certainly grew those kinds of programs when I was in LA Unified, not just in Spanish, but Armenian, Korean, Mandarin. And so I think it's just the way of the world going forward.
Yeah. And then the Tatum property, this project was going to be, I guess, senior housing. Now it doesn't pencil out according to the developer. Maybe it's going to be low-income housing for teachers. Where does that stand?
So that's coming to the board for a decision on May 11th, where they will be deciding on whether they want to continue on that path of sale or lease, or perhaps even no action at this time. And so stay tuned on May 11th. We'll be making that decision.
All right. And then I read an op-ed by one of the leaders of the Future Leaders of America group recently, talking about how in the AG courses, which are the prerequisites to apply to a four-year college, that the data was extremely negative for Latino students. Is there any thought being given to align that AG with graduation requirements, or what's happening with that?
Yes, that is something that I did commit to look into when I was in a session with Future Leaders of America. And we will be talking about that. I believe that's scheduled for our May 25th meeting as well, if I remember correctly. We will be sharing that data with our board members. There is a need to align the A through G requirements with graduation requirements. There are some things that the system needs to do better with, and that is hiring. We're going to need more foreign language teachers to achieve that, and we need some more teachers in mathematics to do that. My goal is that we serve the purpose of public education by preparing students to have that opportunity. They have to be college prepared. Yes, there's career preparation as well, but I don't want the choice to be made by us. Again, transformational leadership with people, not to people. And so our children should be graduating with college preparedness, and meeting A through G is indicative of that.
So that's something you're moving towards.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And
then
the data does that bear out for Santa Barbara, excuse me, sorry to interrupt you. The data does bear out that our Latino students have not traditionally been able to access that pattern.
yeah, I think it was 38% of graduating Latinos and 71% for whites. And then let me read one more quote that you gave me a year ago. And you were talking about English learners, which, you know, goes, I think, to the root of a lot of the issues that you have to deal with. The practices that we bring to instruction around English learners need to look different, just like in the case of special education, for example. Have you been able to make any progress on that amid all of the other Sturm und Drang that's been going on?
I'm proud to say that we did, and I'm not going to say me because, again, I'm a new leader, so I have to give credit where credit is due. This cabinet, Maria Larios Horton and others, were already queued up to adopt a new English language development program for elementary school kids using the science content. And so through teaching science, we're also developing English language. And so that happened in the fall, and teachers have begun training on that. We're also getting a little tighter around defining, well, what does the program look like for a student that comes into our school system that doesn't speak English and sits in a classroom with a teacher that only speaks English? How does that teacher know how to develop their language? And so that defining the program, adopting a curriculum are the two things that were definitely accomplished so far.
And is that related to, or does that relate also to the Newcomer Academy, which I think is one of the summer programs? Yes,
in the secondary, it is, we adopted also the ERWC, the writing sorry for all my notifications. The writing curriculum was adopted for secondary students as
Yeah,
well.
Cammie's telling you, tell Jerry to shut up because your time is up. All right, the last thing, you told me you were a year ago, again, you were this close to closing on a house, to getting a place. Did you do that? Is your family here? Where are you living? What's going on?
Sadly, I'm in a lease that's ending in June. I will be looking to purchase something, hopefully, but the market's so bad.
Oh, yeah.
So who knows? I may. So my lease is up in June. My husband lost his father in December,
I'm sorry.
and his company closed, like physically, the building and everybody closed down, and they went full remote. But his job was to sell furniture, get rid of the building facilities. So I've been here mostly alone, but I go back and forth to LA when I can. I was writing a doctorate most every weekend. And they come out, my sons, one of them graduated in December. He bit the bullet and said, if I'm not gonna do anything else, I might as well just take my 5 classes and graduate. The other one is at UCI, also online. And so, yes, I'm in the market for a new place now. I've yet to call a realtor.
All right, everybody out there hear that. Let's find a place for the superintendent. Hilda Maldonado, thank you so much for taking so much time to talk with us, and thanks for all your hard work over the year, and everybody at the district. It's been obviously extraordinary, and something that I at least hope not to see again. All right.
I agree with you, and thank you so much for having me on, Jerry. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.